Question: do lizards also have the extender jaw (brackets? Not sure what to call it).
That's your question, Joe.
Not really, no. So basically, it's not even so. It's kind of an extended jaw. You've got a special bone. Number one, and put me up to full screen if you wouldn't mind, Sam, so I can kind of demonstrate. Where we are, we're over there. Okay, so effectively on the bottom of the snake's jaw, you've got two halves of the jaw which are not joined together, and I'll show you on the big titanoboa in a moment. But number one, they don't have a chin here, where we have a hard bony chin. They don't have a chin. They actually have a large ligament and a flap of skin that moves up into the mouth so that they can open it out like that. Now at the back here, where we are obviously a hinged jaw, again, it's not fully hinged on a snake. What you have is a special bone called a quadruped bone, which effectively folds down. It tucks itself up, it folds down as the snake opens its mouth. So the jaws, which are sitting here separated like this, effectively go like that. Okay, now lizards don't have that. Lizards have a fixed jaw, same way, well, not exactly the same way as we do, but it's a hinged jaw like we do. But if we get our titanoboa over here, which is only just kind of balanced together at the moment, but you can see what we can do is we can do that, right? The head is actually completely separate from the two jaws. The two jaws are two separate bits. And then if Diane, if you would hold that up for me like so I can kind of come around on this side. The jaws effectively fit on like that. So you have stretchy ligaments at the back here, the quadruped bone, which fits down. It's not joined at the front here. And so the snake's mouth can effectively go like that. And yes, the titanoboa would be able to go like that, if not bigger. Okay, so they are pretty impressive set of jaws in the snakes, but not the same as in reptiles.
So how is, if snakes have come from lizards, how is that modified, Joe, from the lizard?
I suspect that they haven't evolved from lizards, or haven't even come from lizards. And John can comment about the legs. We've got a legs question as well with regards to lizards losing their legs. But there are a number of specific things in snakes, like the quadruped bone, for instance, which lizards don't have. Certainly not lizards today. And so that is something that would require an addition of information, an addition of a feature, rather than a degradation of a feature. So I suspect whatever the ancestor of the snake was, even when they had legs, because we know that they used to have legs, would have also had this quadruped bone. The one thing that you can't do with a hinged the one thing you can't do with an unhinged jaw, bearing in mind, and I mean that not in the sense that snakes unhinge their jaw, but in their jaw is already not a hinged one, right? The one thing you can't do with a jaw like that is chew, right? Lizards can chew, lizards can rip, crocodiles can grab and chomp and can spin and pull and tear, and you can't do that if your jaw isn't actually fixed in place, right? Because you'd pull your jaw off. So instead you have a jaw that actually works by going in sequence, kind of drawing and clawing the food into its mouth. So you would have to have that set up effectively from the beginning to eat in that way.
Okay,
so that's Shoggywar's. That sort of answers Shoggywar's question, I think.
Sorry about that. Since you mentioned my name in there, Joe, I'll come in on that. When you have a look, and someone's asked a question about, we only have the word serpent in French. Now, when you look at snakes, they are in serpentes, right, as a technical group. So they're still called serpents. When you look at the biblical picture of serpents, it obviously is a walking serpent, and there is undeniably only one serpent involved here back in the Garden of Eden. Now, the principle of degeneration after sin came in has spread far and wide. So it's not just that original serpent who, as you rightly point out, would have had to have a jaw that is capable of extension, as you've mentioned. Now, the degeneration has spread not only through that family, but to across all the families, but not descended from that original serpent who's cursed by God. The question that some people have asked is, where does the word snake come from? And that's an old Proto-European word meaning creeper or crawler, right? So that when you look at present-day snakes, if you come to Australia and see a snake for the first time, it creeps along the ground. So it's a very descriptive term. We'll call it a snake which is old Proto-Indo-European for a creeper or crawler. The Vikings had a different word. They referred to it as an orm, like their little legless amphibians in the caves that look like worms or snakes, but they really aren't. That they used a different word because it was a creeper or a crawler, but it lived in holes in the ground, etc. So when you look at this, the original serpent is the one who is cursed. The original serpent is the one who actually would have to have that structure already in place. From then on, it can lose things. From then on, the number of its vertebrae can be multiplied. And some of you may have relatives in amongst your family who have one or two more backbones than normal. It's a degeneration. They may have one or two less, and that's a degeneration. So this degeneration has not just been confined to that original Serpentes family, but it's spread far and wide across the whole of creation, so that the lizards we talked about, many of them have definitely degenerated. Some you can watch them degenerate across the river here in Brisbane, right? Going from legs on one side to not so good at leg transmission on the other side. So you see it in many families, and you see it in human beings. That group that I showed you were definitely that they were kept as a menagerie by one of the kings, because he was so fascinated by the little people who'd lost the ability to grow and who'd lost all sorts of things in backbone structure and you name it. Diane, you might want to comment on that sort of deformation in human beings as our medical expert on the spot. Have you got anything to say on that?
Yes, it's something that happens during embryological development, and it goes back to that group of genes you referred to called Hox genes, which is short for homeobox. So it's a group of genes that control the basic body plan, because remember, we all start out in life as just one big round cell, which will then multiply into a ball of cells. And then out of that, you've got to construct a body with a head at one end and a backside at the other, and a backbone in between, and limbs coming off the side at the appropriate place along the backbone. And not all backbones are the same. Not all the individual vertebral bones are the same. There are some that are designed to be neck vertebrae and some that are designed to be thoracic or chest vertebrae, and they have ribs associated with them. And so as you're forming this body, the instructions need to go out. All right, we need to make so many neck vertebrae. Then we need to change the system and bring in another group of genes, and they will make thoracic vertebrae or chest vertebrae. And at that change over time, that is actually where your upper limbs, if you're a human being, start to grow, or the forelimbs of a four-legged creature will start to grow. So another group of genes has to be activated and say, right, we're going to grow some legs here. Now, if something goes wrong in the way that the body plan is set out, so that we have neck vertebrae here and then we change to thoracic vertebrae here, if that change doesn't happen properly, the limbs will not grow, because they lose their cue, as it were. They lose the chemical signal that goes out, all right, start growing some limbs here, and in the meantime, we'll make some thoracic vertebrae. And so it's a process where, again, it's a degeneration. Even though you may end up with a longer body, you end up with a loss of limbs, because the signals are getting garbled in the process that's making the body.
Yeah.
That's probably a similar thing that's happening to the pipefish that I've talked about in the past.
Yes,
the growth
indeed.
genes with the body in the seahorse family, and the pipefish are extending long ways. Yeah.
Joe, I've got a question along the lines of the question. You've talked in the past about how when you worked in the zoo, that you got bit by an iguana and you couldn't get loose from it. I assume that's because it's got a jointed jaw, but with a snake, have not jointed but connected by muscles, can you just grab them then and open their mouth up?
Yes, With difficulty, because those muscles are quite strong. So it depends on the size of your snake again, right? Oftentimes with a small snake, like a small python, like a royal python, or the Americans call it a ball python, oftentimes you can encourage by slightly squeezing the side of the head to get it to open its mouth. But they have remarkably strong jaws. So it doesn't work if the snake puts pressure on it. So, for instance, like a crocodile, right, or an alligator grabs hold of the meat and does the death roll, right, it spins something off, right. If a snake tried to do that with the weight of its body behind it, it would rip its jaw off because it's an unhinged jaw. But when it's biting you and you're trying to pull it off, they can be remarkably resilient. There's a few different ways. You can try it the traditional way with lizards, which is to squirt a bit of vinegar in the corner of its mouth, but it doesn't always work very well, as I found out. The other way is to well, it's not very nice, so it really does depend on. Normally with a small snake you just leave it and it'll eventually let go, right, because it doesn't hurt very much. With a big snake, particularly one that's squeezing you at the same time, the best way is to actually dunk its head in water. Because it will let go of it much quicker that way, right? And normally they have enough sense to let go of you before they drown. So that's if you ever get bitten by a large non-venomous snake, that's a tip for you there.